So I have decided to pick up Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong, the icon queen. She wrote These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends, which are it's a duology, and it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai, which I read and I loved so much. So I honestly, to the point where I will literally read anything Chloe Gong writes. I'm only 30 pages into this, but I'm literally obsessed. This one, I don't know how much is a spoiler, but basically there's this girl from These Violent Delights. Her name's Rosalind, and the gangs have been disbanded, and now it's a political civil war, and she got resurrected, and now she's an immortal assassin. She can't die except if she's poisoned. So she is fighting for the nationalists, and the other side is the communists. And so her immortal assassin self is sent on a mission to find out who is killing a bunch of people around Shanghai. So I'm so excited. I'm gonna read it physically because I think I might want to annotate it. I'm not sure yet. But yes, I'm so excited. And as for audiobooks, I am going to pick up Station 11. It's just the next one that's on my shelf. It's the one that's due in the least amount of time from my library. So I'm excited about this. It does have to do with a pandemic that ravages the earth, and then there's a theater troupe that goes around doing what they do. So I'm a little bit skeptical because pandemic, touchy subject, but I am still excited, and it should be quick, especially on audio. So I finished Station 11 on audio just now. I loved it. I got caught in a kind of rabbit hole looking at the trailers for the HBO show that's based on this. So I think I have kind of a more dramatized viewpoint if I hadn't watched the trailers. But basically, this is a story, it's a dystopian story about a pandemic that destroys 98% of the world's population, but it's not mostly about the pandemic or the apocalypse as it's known. It doesn't focus on struggles that the characters have in the apocalypse like most dystopian books do. This is more focused on the humanity and how humanity lives on in art and theater and music, and the people who you're gonna find in any post-apocalyptic book, the people who want everything, who are really selfish, who have guns. But it's mainly about how art transcends even an apocalypse, which I think is so beautiful. And then the themes of connection, there's individual stories throughout time, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, 20 years in the future. And then at the end, you kind of figure out how all of them are connected. And then so it's kind of just a story about connection and art, which I just found so beautiful. It took me a minute to get into it. At the beginning, I was like, oh, this hits a little bit too close to home because it still feels very oh my god, this could have happened back in 2020. So it was a little bit scary at first. So I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars, 4.5 if you want to get specific. But yeah. And then my plan, I'm on page 52 of Foul Lady Fortune. My plan was to read some of it today, but I don't know if I'm gonna. But I know I'm definitely gonna pick up another audiobook because I've set my mind to finishing all of these books because I just want new books, and I'm excited. There's only 30 left, and I'm so hyped. Okay, so I literally didn't mention this at all because this past 2 weeks have been really hectic, but I picked up The Space Between Worlds on audio and I finished it yesterday. or 2 days ago, I think, and I gave it 3 stars. The concept was like super interesting. It's about a woman who can basically, like, they've figured out how to move between worlds in the multiverse, and there's this woman who is basically like hired to be one of these travelers who walks between worlds and collects data about the other worlds. And so that's like a super cool concept. I feel like it was just executed really strangely. And then she discovers this plot where the like higher up person is like doing bad stuff, but I feel like it's not super solidified. There's no real like reason she's trying to stop this guy. It's kind of just like, this is what's right, but there's no personal like, oh, this is bad, so I'm gonna like try and stop it. Like, there was a lot of info dumping, and it just, I don't know, I had thoughts, but I forgot them. So I gave it 3 stars because it was kind of just like an average book. Like, it wasn't horrible. I enjoyed my time reading it, but I didn't love it. Unfortunately, because I was really excited for it. I've had it on my shelf for a really long time. I look a mess, just like my life right now. My hair has never been this curly in my life. I've literally just kept it in a bun for like 3 days straight. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think it makes me look like a 1800s, like too curly. I don't like it. Anyway, I picked up Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson on audio the other day. I'm like 80 something percent of the way through it. This is the spin-off duology for the Kiss of Deception trilogy, which I did like a lot. And I was expecting to like this because it's like in the same universe, but nothing has happened. It's similar to the Kiss of Deception, where there's like 2 main people who have secrets from each other that the audience sort of knows about, but there's also secrets that the audience doesn't know about. So it's kind of confusing. It's basically like Cassie is a thief, but is in the Queen's army, I think, and her 2 like co-workers are going to find someone to bring back to the Queen, and we don't know who that is because that's one of the things that has been kept from us. And there's Jace, who is thank you. There's Jace, who is a part of the Bellinger people who are like nomads. I don't know, but they come across one another and they're chained together, and like unfortunate things happen, and they end up being forced to go to Jace's home together, which is where Cassie needs to go to find this person that they're searching for. And what in the insta-love? It's like the most insta-lovey thing I've ever seen, and I don't want it. It's a YA trope, but like, I don't want it. They're in love because they were like, well, let's make the most out of being chained together. So they start a relationship or like a situationship. I just want to finish it is my goal for today. There's 3 hours left of the audiobook, which is 1.5 hours in 2 times speed. So I think I'm just gonna finish it now and read Vow of Thieves, which is the second and final one, sometime else. I just finished Dance of Thieves. I gave it 3 stars because ultimately I was just bored the entire time. There were a couple of like battles that were fun, but I was just so bored. It was very political, and like the Kiss of Deception trilogy and like every single book in that trilogy, there was like a big twist that like you're not supposed to see coming. It was kind of just like a meh twist to me. It wasn't like, oh my god, but it was kind of just like, oh, this was expected, but like I didn't know exactly what was expected. Like, it was a twist that I knew was coming, but I didn't know exactly what the specific twist was. There was a little Easter egg from the Kiss of Deception trilogy, which I loved because I loved those characters so much. And so I was like super excited, but I feel like that wasn't enough to bump it from a 3 to a 4-star. It definitely was not getting a 5-star, but there was a, like, at the very end, when all this, like, when like the climax was happening, I was like, oh, maybe it's a 4-star, but then I was like, no, rate the book as a whole. It was just boring, and the circumstances in which these people found themselves were just so random, and I didn't understand how they came to be. The world lore is really, really interesting though, but I don't really give that to this book. I give that to the original trilogy. I am done with this. I think I'm gonna take a break, or I don't know, but like I am not jumping at the opportunity to read the next one, Vow of Thieves. Although I want to read it to get it over with, you know? So who knows? So I'm just like sitting at my desk doing work, and I have so many thoughts. Basically, I just started Anxious People by Fredrik Backman on audio, and I can already tell this is gonna be such a good book. I love Fredrik Backman's writing. Like, he wrote A Man Called Uva, which was like a book I read a really long time ago after I got out of like a 10-year-long reading slump, and I absolutely adored it. And I could just tell that this is just gonna be about the human condition and like how people react to like trauma or just like generic scenarios. So basically there's a bank robbery, but the story is not about the bank robbery. The story is about figuring out how this guy, after the bank robbery, fled into an apartment showing where like a bunch of people were, and like it turned into a hostage situation. And so the whole story is told afterwards, where they're trying to figure out how and what happened. And so it's basically told throughout everyone's point of views who were there, like telling the story about like how this happened. And I can tell it's already not going to be like a story. It's just going to be about how all these people were feeling, how they all play into it, and like how they reacted, and like their own human condition of relating to this, and like how this affects their lives in other ways rather than being caught up in a hostage situation. I don't know. I'm like 15% of the way through, and I can already tell this is gonna be like a really, really, really good book. Like, if it's not a 5-star, I would be shocked. I just finished Anxious People. I cried. This man can literally do no wrong. This, at its heart, is a story about human connection. All these people who are caught up in the hostage situation all have like something going on, and by the end of it, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for all of them. And I just think it's beautiful. And it's also kind of like a mystery at its core as well. Like, there is that mystery element of like, oh, like who's the hostage taker, bank robber person, etc. And about how you might change somebody's life in like the tiniest way by just brushing past them on the sidewalk, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And I cried, like I said, but it literally, like, from the minute I bought this back in like 2021, I was like, this is going to be a really good book. It's obviously going to be 5 stars. It was. So I'm just like so happy I read it, and it was perfect. So this is very random, and I didn't even realize it was happening until it happened, but I picked up and finished Severance by Ling Ma on audio. I picked it up like right after I finished Anxious People, and it took me like 5 hours, and I literally could not stop reading it or listening to it. Like, it's satire about like the end of the world, and this girl Candace, who, like, millennial girl Candace, who can't stop working, and like literally the end of the world, like a global pandemic, is happening around her, and she can't stop work. Like, she's like unaware, not like completely unaware, but she's like, oh, this is just like the norm, which is like sort of like a little bit like freaky, because like, you know, that's kind of what happened in 2020. So it was wildly, like, a little bit scarily accurate. like I totally can see this happening. The humor is so dry, and it literally is like, you don't even realize that it's like supposed to be a humorous book, but it's also like dark humor, because it's like, this is the end of the world and this woman is still doing her day-to-day life. So I think that was really, really funny. I am questioning if it's a 5-star. I think it might be. The only thing I'm like a little bit about is that it left like really ambiguously, but I also think that that's a interesting facet of this, where it's like, who knows what's gonna happen. This woman has been working her life away through the apocalypse. So I don't know if it's a 4 or a 5. I think it's a 5. I really, really loved it. So that would mean I finished 2 books today and they were both 5 stars. But anyway, I didn't even realize that I was finishing it until I had like a half hour left, and I was like, well, I can't just stop listening. It's like 11:30 at night. I need to go to sleep. But I'm proud of myself for finishing another book. Spent all day in bed, and I decided to pick up the Guinevere Deception, and I finished it. I keep doing this. I don't know what's going on. I literally just was so tired all day, so I literally spent the entire day in bed and listened to this for like 5 straight hours. If you didn't know, it's a Camelot, like King Arthur, Gwen retelling, where the Princess Guinevere is like not who she says she is, and they're like trying to like uncover a plot to save Arthur. Like, she's there to like save him from like the bad people, and all like the classic characters are in it, like all the knights of Camelot and Lancelot and Morgan Le Fay / Morgana. It was really fun and I really loved it. I did think the storyline was kind of like not fleshed out, especially the setup for the whole story wasn't super set up really well, and I was kind of lost sometimes, but I loved the end, and I can definitely see where the story's going because it's a trilogy and it just set it up really nicely. I do think it could have done with like just some more build up, like just some more explaining on the author's part of like what the heck is going on, because Guinevere gets there and we like immediately know like she's not who she says she is, and like the magic is kind of just tossed around lightly. Like, a lot of people know about her magic very quickly in the book. If you go into it knowing the story of like King Arthur and Gwen and those guys, it's not really a surprise what happens at the end. But I still loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It was a very good like step back into this world after really loving the show Merlin when I was like 15. And I still love that world and those characters, so it's just a nice step back into the world, and I like definitely really enjoyed it. I am obsessed with this book. I come to you at 10 p.m. with 2 updates. I finished 2 books today. I swear this has just become like a 48-hour readathon of mostly audiobooks. So the content, not great, but I'm having the time of my life and I'm finishing all these books and I'm so happy about it. So in the last clip, you will have seen me reading Minnow Pea on my Kindle. This is like the only not an audiobook for a really long time, but it was super short. It's only like 200 pages, so I finished it in like an hour and a half. So it's about this island called Nollop, and on the island, the town of Nollopton is like, they like worship the guy who came up with the sentence, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, which is the sentence that uses all the letters of the alphabet. And so from his statue, the sentence is underneath it in tiles, and the tiles start to like fall off. And so the town interprets that as, okay, so for example, the letter Z falls off. You can no longer use the letter Z in anything you say or anything you write. And so slowly all of the letters start to fall off. So the letters, like the written letters that all of these people send, slowly become like very hard to read and gibberish and like sounding the words out with the letters they have left. Everyone starts to leave the island, and so Ella Minnow Pea is forced basically of her own volition to save the town and come up with a new sentence that uses all the letters of the alphabet so that they can worship like another person other than this guy who is from beyond telling them not to use any of these letters. So it's like satire and so funny. Obviously it's like primarily humor, so it's just like a fun read, but it comments on the ideas of censorship and like a totalitarian government and stuff like that. So it was very good. It was such an enjoyable read. It was super quick, but I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And earlier, before I finished Minnow Pea, I picked up and finished Beach Read on audio. This is the last romance book on my shelves, which is super exciting for me because I'm definitely not a romance person. But it's by the romance icon Emily Henry, and I got it a while ago. I think I got it in like the beginning of 2022, so it's been on my shelves for a really long time. But I'm glad I finished it. It was okay. It was like, well, okay, it was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. I'm just not a romance person because I feel like they're all the same. Basically, there's 2 authors. They're like rival authors in small town northern Michigan, on Lake Michigan, which is like one of my favorite places in the world. So these 2 rival authors are Gus and January. It's told from January's perspective. January's a romance writer and Gus is like a literary fiction writer. And so they challenge each other to write from the opposing genre, so the other person's genre, and they fall in love, obviously, because it's a romance. Yeah, it just followed the same tropes as all romance books do, so I liked it. It felt like a very good, solid romance read to me. So I was editing this video and I realized I kind of wanted to like wrap up all of these books that I had just read because I found so many similarities. Like while I was listening to them, I found so many similarities between so many of them, and I just wanted to get these thoughts out because I was having them. I had just come out of like the audiobook mood where I was so into an audiobook and I just like, I couldn't collect my thoughts. So this is what this is. So I'm gonna start with just these books that I found had things in common. The first batch is Station 11, Severance, and Minnow Pea. They're all sort of about the end of the world. So Station 11 and Severance are about pandemics that ravage the earth, and it is all these main characters can do to keep living. And I just found that so interesting, where they just, it's not about the pandemic, it's not about the dystopian world they live in, it's about, in the face of this end of the world situation, how do you keep living and how do you keep living your life to the fullest possible, because obviously like it's at the end of the world, but you still have to find things that make you happy and that you love. So I was just taken when I was reading Severance. I was like, oh, this is very much like Station 11. And then Severance is also like Minnow Pea because they're both satire. They both have really dark humor. And it's both like, oh crap, like the world is kind of ending. In Minnow Pea, the world is ending because the people of Nollop are having their voice basically taken away from them, because every time they say a letter that has fallen off of the tile, they get like if they say it 3 times, they get banished. So everyone's leaving the island. And so similarly to Severance, where everyone is getting sick and leaving the city, same with Station 11. Everyone's leaving to go to the country where there are less people inhabiting. I was like, oh, I feel like I've just like read a very similar book, because it's sort of dystopian. Like, it was sort of the end of the world once a lot of people were off the island, and once Ella was left, it was just like, that was it. It was the end of the world, and Ella was trying to save the world. Similarly, in Severance, Candace is like the only one left at her place of work. And so I was just like, oh crap, these are literally, they fit into the exact same category, which I just was like, oh, that's freaking awesome. And then in Anxious People, it was sort of similar to Station 11, where the theme of the book is just about human connection. It's how all of these people have some kind of connection, whether it's you just pass them on the street and they will impact your life in a completely like unknowable way in the future, and like even the characters themselves don't know it. The only reason we know it is because we're reading it from like an omniscient point of view. So these two, I was like, oh wow, they're so similar. And then Beach Read, the Guinevere Deception, and Space Between Worlds are kind of outliers, because while the Space Between Worlds is also like sci-fi and dystopian, it is also about human connection. But I feel like that's kind of just like a general theme in books nowadays. So this is kind of an outlier. This is obviously an outlier because it's like in a completely fantasy world. But it gets its own spotlight because it was good and I liked it. And then Beach Read, I had an idea about it yesterday when I finished it. I think it was similar to Anxious People in my mind because of the transcendence of like family. And there's a scene in Beach Read that is very similar to Anxious People, like with a dad and his kid, and how the dad maybe isn't telling them everything, and then the kid finds out things, and it's like, okay, you're my dad, so I have to trust you and believe you, and even though you did some things, I still love you because you're my dad. So that was what I was thinking about when I was reading Beach Read. And even though Beach Read's a romance, it still was just like this community of people who, they don't know each other really well, but they become really, really close really, really quickly. And so I just was like thinking about these two at the same time lately. And they're also pretty similar in vibe. So yeah, I just had to get that out of my system because I was just very like, I was thinking hard about all of these books. And so I'm really proud of myself because there are so many of them and I read them all in like a week. I literally just, I don't know what happened. But I hope you enjoyed this as much as me. I'm gonna go read some more now.